turn to Section 1.
And Gianna, the office counselor of a company. First, you have some time to read questions 1 to 6. Now listen to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 6. What's up, Gianna? You look like you're in bad shape.
Yes, maybe I'll get sick leave from the boss and finally catch up on some sleep. I've barely eaten and slept in days.
Those are warning signs of occupational stress. How are things at work?
Terrible. After all the layoffs lately, the workload is totally overwhelming for everyone that's left. So I spend every waking moment in the office. I'm kept busy all the time.
So you need to take a few minutes break every so often to clear and refresh your mind.
But my boss will complain I'm not hard-working. She's so capricious that you can't predict her reaction sometimes.
Maybe your boss just doesn't have a clue about how much you're really doing. Keep her updated on your achievements and projects. Also insist that she prioritize everything so you can manage your time better.
That's right. I suppose that would help me regain some sense of control, but I'm afraid that she'll take that as a sign of laziness and give me the axe.
So take the initiative and hit the job hunting trail now. You'll be surprised at how many opportunities are out there.
That's encouraging.
Anyway, you should cheer up and get rid of the situation. You know, according to a survey, about 40% of all people find their work very stressful, and 25% develop mental or physical diseases. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen to the conversation and answer questions 7 to 10.
So serious? I didn't know that. How do the problems start?
You know, they start when conflicts at work induces stress. Your body reacts by flooding the bloodstream with hormones that tense up your muscles and increase your blood pressure. This is meant to save you in a fight or flight situation, but leads to a host of illnesses, ranging from insomnia and headaches to heart attacks, when it occurs regularly over an extended period of time.
What should I do to prevent such things happening?
Well, most occupational stress is attributed to a recognized lack of control. You should act in advance to relieve the problems. For example, you should actively pursue career opportunities rather than quietly worry about getting fired. Of course, you can't control everything, so you need to help your mind and body cope. Keep a journal to release your frustrations, take short walks to calm down, or if necessary, simply take a mental health day. That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You are going to hear a talk given by Madeline. She is going to introduce the recreational facilities on campus and in town.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name's Madeline Stewart, and I'm here to tell you about the recreational facilities available on campus, and also to tell you something about what the town has to offer. You may already know that your students' union membership also includes membership of the sports union, which provides a range of sporting and recreational facilities on campus, much the same as those in most British universities. The sports union has football, tennis, and cricket teams in local competitions. And really, most sports are catered for in some way on campus, even if they're just social matches. In the building itself, there are fitness classes and a full gym, including weights. The sports union can also provide cheap tickets to some major sporting events. And to keep you up to date with everything available, there's a weekly newsletter distributed around the campus. You should check this to find out the names and phone numbers of the contact people for each sport or activity you're interested in. Yes, did you have a question?
Yes, apart from what you've just said, does the sports union offer individual help in any of its activities, for example, in getting fit and healthy?
Yes, we do. The sports union has a fitness assessment clinic every Friday, staffed by the resident sports trainer, who can provide advice on the best program for you and refer you to various charts. I'm sure you all realize that for any medical assessment or health problem, you should go to the University Medical Service. The sports trainer can also advise you on a suitable training program using the weights.
First, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 17 to 20.
And now on to Ashbury. For a town of its size, Ashbury has some unusually good leisure and sporting facilities, most of which are near the center of town and easily reached by bus from this campus. There's a new, well, almost new, Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's not quite in the central town area, but it's only a 5-minute walk from the bus stop. Above the pool, there's a high-tech fitness center that any of you more serious fitness lovers would need to check out. Then, in the center of town, there's a sporting complex called the Anderson Center, which contains squash courts and facilities for a number of other indoor sports, such as basketball. And just around the corner from the Anderson Center, in the main street there, is an indoor bowling alley. All of these facilities are listed in the weekly newsletter, so I encourage you all to look through it and...
This is the end of section 2. Now you have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 3. Part 3.
We'll hear a talk given by a lecturer to a group of civil engineering students on the reed bed system for sewage treatment.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today about what is now called the reed bed sewage treatment system. This system uses naturally occurring reeds to treat domestic and industrial waste. It's an environmentally friendly alternative to normal systems. You all know what reeds are like, don't you? Those tall plants with hollow stems that grow in wet places, like marshes, for example. Here's how the system works. First of all, an artificial marsh is created. To do this, holes are dug about 1 metre deep and usually rectangular in shape. They are then lined with clay or plastic, and the liner is covered with gravel. After that, a system of tubing is laid, with holes in it, and more gravel is added to cover that. Finally, reeds are planted in the bed. The sewage is brought to settling tanks. From there, it is distributed to the roots of the reeds through the tubing. Note that the waste material enters the beds underground and remains underground. The reeds conduct oxygen very efficiently through their stems to the roots system. Here, bacteria work to reduce the waste material to basic elements. What comes out of the artificial marsh is water that has been cleaned through a natural process. The purified water leaves the reed bed through a simple outflow pipe. The water that comes out has to be tested. Sometimes it's held in a pond until it evaporates or soaks into the ground. Sometimes, after testing, the water is discharged directly into streams and rivers.
Before the talk continues, with questions from the students,
You have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
The reed bed system originated in Germany in the 1970s, and installations have been built in a number of countries throughout the world. To give you an idea of the size and appearance of a reed bed installation, an area of 3 by 5 metres approximately would be adequate for a single house. It would look like a pond overgrown with reeds. There are cities with 150,000 people in Germany whose entire sewage treatment requirements are served by reed bed installations which extend for 10 to 20 hectares. There are two wonderful environmental advantages. First of all, reed bed systems are natural composters. As time passes, high-grade soil builds up in the beds. The soil can be removed and used for agricultural purposes. Soil produced from waste containing heavy metals would of course have to be tested and the toxic material removed by chemical processes. An additional advantage is that the reed bed can function exactly as a marsh, providing a healthy natural home or habitat for waterfowl and other birds, insects, reptiles and mammals. But there are practical advantages to a reed bed system over existing sewage treatment plants as well. At all levels, the cost is lower than for normal systems. Labour costs are a fraction of the costs of a conventional system. Typically, a large-scale reed bed installation will cost 10% less than a mechanical system. They require little maintenance, and unlike mechanical systems, the efficiency of reed beds increases over time. But before we go any further, you must have some questions. Maybe this sounds too good to be true.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask. If these systems have so many benefits, why aren't they more popular? Why don't we see them everywhere?
As I said, the technology is now almost 40 years old. Demonstration projects of all types have been built and monitored and are slowly convincing regulators of the advantages of the system. But you have to understand that regulating authorities are by nature conservative and resist change. Typically, there's a lot of opposition to these systems by manufacturers and by everyone involved in maintaining the conventional systems. Reed bed systems require fewer staff to operate, so there would be a decline in the workforce. Therefore, unions would resist the change as well.
What happens to reed beds in winter? Does the efficiency decrease?
The above-ground part of the plants die back in cold weather, but the roots remain alive and active, and the system continues to work just as effectively in winter. As soon as the weather warms up, new reeds appear and grow quickly.
Is there a problem with mosquitoes in these ponds?
Well, they're not exactly ponds with standing water. The beds look more like a field covered with long grass. The soil is moist, but not like a swamp, so there would be no more mosquitoes than in any other field. Remember, the effluent enters the beds underground and remains underground. OK, let's get into some of the technical details now, and I'll answer questions as they come up.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 4.
You will hear part of a lecture on the current and future use of mobile phones. You now have 30 seconds to read questions 31 to 35.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 35.
Okay, now today we're looking at changes in communication, and specifically changes that have just happened or are likely to happen in the next few years. Key to this is the mobile phone, which is increasingly being seen as an all-purpose system rather than just a phone. If you only use your phone for texting and making calls now, you will be amazed at how you'll be using it in the future. The technology has been developed for a range of other uses. For example, phones could be used so that if you are meeting someone and they get lost, you could send them a map of your location to help them. This will save all those complicated explanations over the phone and our poor friends or colleagues trying to drive and find out where they are at the same time. And if you get bored waiting, or if you're traveling, for example, you will soon be able to see TV news on your phone as it is actually being broadcast. This means that you won't have to miss any of your favorites if you were away for a few days. Most people have got used to texting now, and young people send pictures to each other. But what is exciting is the possibility of putting music with them before you send them. And it's not all frivolous. Phones are going to become even more critical in business and education. Some recent developments have a highly practical usage. So, for example, as lecturers, we will be able to send everybody a text to let them know if lectures have been canceled. And the new phones could have a further use in education, as well as business, as they will enable us to go to any destination, such as when we are doing a field trip, for instance. And from there, to send data directly to a computer so that we can access it when we get home. This means we will no longer be limited by what the phone can store.
You now have 30 seconds to read questions 36 to 40.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 36 to 40.
And it's interesting to look at the different ways that men and women use phones now, as that does affect how the technology will develop. Some research has been done on how people use phones, and some of the results are surprising. One of the increasing usages of mobile phones is to get all sorts of data, such as phone numbers, the weather, train times, etc. And while there's been an attempt to set up connections with things that women might be interested in accessing, it is overwhelmingly men who do this. But what about the traditional use of a phone? To speak to people? I suppose we would predict that it is mainly women who use phones as a method of contact for friends and family, but, in fact, the genders exploit this facility equally. I've spoken about the increased business usages that phones will offer, and I suppose we would associate this usage with men. The survey picked up, though, that women are often working from home or catching up with work in the evenings, so they use phones in this way as much as men do. Most of us are aware we can store photos on our phones. It's an ideal method of capturing a moment wherever you are. Women tend to be the group that keep photos on their phones, but it seems that men use their phones to actually take pictures much more than women do. And of course, all this knowledge affects the marketing that the companies will do in order to sell the phone.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Give it to me.